Thank you. Anyway, I want to thank, obviously I see Peter Webster, one of our board members on, and his colleagues from Aon. We have a great presentation today. And I want to thank Angie and Sam for bringing this idea up, and then our friends at Aon for joining the conversation today. And then I'll introduce each of our speakers, and then obviously I want to thank Hackensack Meridian Health, Linda, for kind of batting cleanup today. But so you heard some of the conversation. We were talking about COVID, and here we are 2 years later, 2.5 years later. And it seems like it went by quickly, but there's been a lot of things that have evolved and changed. So I think, Angie, your presentation, the title of this program hits it right on the head: the world of work evolution and the impact of business. And I could tell you, I've talked to many of our members, and again, all sectors, and it seems like the hybrid thing is still out there, remote, people requiring vaccination. So it's a mixed bag. The whole great reshuffle or resignation. I heard a term 2 weeks ago called the boomerang. People are coming back. It's all about employee retention, employee engagement. What do you do? It's a struggle. There's no doubt. And I think today's program, what we hope to do is leave everybody with some action items, because again, we have a panel of great experts and a lot of information and nuggets that we're going to give out today. So I'm going to get right into it. I'm going to introduce each speaker. They have some slides. We are recording this. We'll send this out to all the members, so feel free to take notes. Again, it's a small enough group, so if you want to ask a question, you could unmute, or you could put it in a chat box, and I'll read the question. So without delay, it's my honor to introduce Angie Tunnell from Meridian Resources. She's the president since 2016, more than 25 years of experience with HR issues. In 2000, Angie was recruited by Meridian Resources to serve as senior vice president. She is the expert on this topic. What Angie's going to do is set it up, and then we'll hear from Robin and Linda. So good morning, Angie. Thank you for being here, and the floor is yours.
Good morning. I'm so excited to be here. This is such a huge topic, and we could probably talk about it all day. So what we're going to try to do as your facilitators is keep it as tight as possible for an hour, but hopefully you will, it will be thought-provoking, and you can walk away with some ideas of what you might be able to start doing or change within your own business to be prepared for the future. So as Tony said, I'm just going to set this up, kind of bring us to how we got here today. And I'm sure that I don't have to inform anybody in this room that business has been changing at a dizzying speed. And I originally developed this topic in April of this year, and I've presented it several times, and I have changed it probably half a dozen times. Even this week, I made a tweak to it. Now, this is not the full presentation. This is more of an intro with a panel, but it's evident how fast we're changing, how quickly we're changing, and businesses are having to manage a lot of change. So how did we get here to today? The evolution of humankind has really been dominated by industrial revolutions, and one after the other, they have changed the face of the modern world. And so let's start at the beginning. In the 1700s, we had the first industrial revolution, where production was mechanized with water and steam. In 1870, almost 100 years later, we had the second industrial revolution of electrification, and that brought mass production, assembly line work. And what's really interesting about this time period is Henry Ford became a very prominent figure, and he introduced us to some of the modern concepts we have today about work, such as the 8-hour workday and the 40-hour work week. A lot of that has been being challenged today, but that's where it got its start. Approximately 100 years later, in the 1970s, we had automation, the rise of electronics, telecommunications, and computers. And then 41 years later, after the third industrial revolution, in 2011, we moved into digitization, and that allowed for just more enhanced automation of processes. And it was during this time period that we really started to see that we're fundamentally altering the way that we work and relate to one another. And then a mere 9 years later, in 2020, we move into the fifth industrial revolution. And this is called personalization. This is when we rely on a lot of artificial intelligence, big data, the Internet of Things, digital platforms, augmented virtual reality. And this is being classified as that this is the Society 5.0, super smart society. And experts are saying this will be the final bridge between man and machine. And of course, I cannot step over COVID, which had a profound impact on the way we work, and we're still navigating its impact today. So this is not so much a history lesson about the Industrial Revolution, but rather look at how rapidly things have been changing. Our first three industrial revolutions had about a 100-year time span. We moved into 41 years into 4.0, 9 as we moved into 5.0. So things are rapidly accelerating, and I highly doubt that we are done yet. So let's look at a couple of things that we're seeing as big impacts in business. First of all, the Great Resignation. 2021, 48 million people voluntarily left their jobs. That's nearly 1 in 4 people. And in 2022, we've seen that trend continue with about 4 million people a month leaving their jobs. And this has caused a lot of recruitment challenges. We have businesses that are dealing with much smaller candidate pools, a highly competitive job market, which has led to a lot of unsustainable offer packages. We have just seen crazy things happen in regard to what companies are willing to do to get those good candidates, a lot of stretch and boundary regard to salary and just your overall compensation package. And despite best efforts, companies are seeing that people will accept an offer, but not show up for their first day, or they'll come on board and then they're gone a month, 2 months, 3 months later. So it's been a very challenging world of recruitment. And we have an incredibly high turnover rate. Businesses have been struggling to manage this high churn, and it's cost American businesses about $1 trillion. And to put it in a tighter math, on a per person basis, every voluntary exit is equivalent to 1/2 to 2 times that person's annual compensation for that employee. So when you have people that you hire, you spend some time training them, you get them going and they leave, that's a pretty big price tag for just that one person alone. And we have a lot of churn happening in the world. And I'm sure at this point, you've heard of quiet quitting. When I presented this about a month and a half, 2 months ago, it was a brand new buzzword, but social media and media in general really got the word out. And a Gallup poll indicated that about 50% or more of US workforce was quiet quitting. And this isn't all about people walking out the door. It's really about people deciding to strictly adhere to what they were hired to do, from the time they invest in their job to the activities they're willing to engage in to get the job done. And people are starting to set more boundaries in regard to having a balance in their lives and not overperforming or leaning into hustle, that hustle and bustle work culture. You're going to hear a little bit more about why this is happening, but there's a lot of theories. One of the biggest ones that people are just tired. We're overworked. We're burnt out. All this high churn and turnover. People are really having to do more work than they used to do. And we have a very low engagement as well. So it's just putting a lot of pressure on the workforce. And so people are drawing a line in the sand. So these situations make it really challenging for businesses to maintain stability, profitability, productivity. And while workers have seemingly had the upper hand over the last couple of years, we're now starting to move into the recession. We're in the recession, and employers are starting to feel that they may have a little bit more say and an upper hand, or at least that tilt is balancing out a little bit more, possibly as we move into a time of layoffs. But no matter where these businesses are, I don't feel, and a lot of people don't feel that we're ever going to go back to the way we used to work. There's a lot of businesses pushing for people to come back into the office, different things that we're doing to try to get back to normal. But I don't think we're ever going to get back to where we were before. So we have to look ahead and find that middle ground where we can truly manage our businesses and be profitable and stable, but we give workers some of what they're looking for so we can have a nice middle ground there. So to set us up, let's look at a couple of significant workplace shifts that have happened. There are many, but just to keep things a little bit tighter today, I'm going to focus on 4 main workplace shifts. We're still navigating the new normal. But one of the big things that have happened since COVID is the rise of the flexible work environment. Now, it was happening before COVID, but COVID really catapulted it into the lap of businesses where, we're finding that 90% of employees would say that morale would increase if their employer allowed some sort of flexibility in the work environment. And there are many ways to doing this. It's not all work at home or not work at home. Businesses have become very creative in regard to how they're offering flexibility, such as flexible work environments, part-time schedules. We're seeing a lot now in the news about the 4-day work week, and there's a lot of businesses experimenting with that, seeing a big rise in contract work, temporary workers. So there's a lot of different ways that you can offer your employees some flexibility. The next is a high demand for internal career growth and mobility. Now, there was a recent study that showed that over half professionals feel it would be difficult to advance their career or transition to another type of job or different industry. 2 out of 3 employees said it's extremely or somewhat likely that they'll leave their employer within the next year because there are not enough opportunities for skill development or career advancement. And what's very interesting is Gen Z and millennials are more likely to say they're going to jump ship. About 74% are ready to move on due to the fact that their companies are not giving them a clear career path or training them for expanding their career or moving up the career ladder. And when you talk about high churn, that's a group of employees you really need to pay attention to. And you'll hear a little bit more later this morning about engagement, but this is a very serious situation that's happening in the workplace. Is we have the lowest engagement in over a decade, maybe more. I know Robin may speak to this in a moment, but this really started to hit home the second half of 2021 and was concurrent with the Great Resignation. And what's very interesting about this is that managers, only 1 in 3 are engaged. So you talk about that trickle down effect. If our managers aren't engaged, they're not doing what they're supposed to do. Who's leading your ships in your organization? And so paying attention to engagement is a really big topic today. And finally, organizational transparency. We're still working in uncertain times, and having organizational transparency gives the foundation for resiliency and agility, which is necessary for organizations to prepare themselves for the future. Organizational transparency builds trust and loyalty. It generates accountability, and again, it will help ensure adaptability to the future. So where are we headed? I've changed this presentation 7 times in the last 6 months or so. We don't know where we're headed, but one thing is for sure, we're going to have to be agile. We're going to have to be able to evolve rapidly, and organizations need to learn how to be more agile. And that starts at the top and with a commitment of leadership and coming up with a good strategy to developing and implementing methods to be more agile. So on this screen, here are a lot of topical areas. Again, we could be here all day long talking about this, but these are the significant areas that companies are really dealing with today. And So this is going to start our conversation. Tony, I'll turn it over to you and we can keep moving.
Yeah, thank you, Angie. So it's my honor to introduce our next speaker, Robin Bouvier, who's the Vice President at Aon's Health Solutions Practice. She joins us from Massachusetts, so thank you, Robin, for being here. She joined Aon in 1999, taking on her current position in 2013. She's spoken on HR issues. I know she's traveled. I guess you were in Nashville last week on this topic. So Robin, thank you for being here. And let me point out too, in addition to Peter Webster on our board, and I think I saw Sean Anderson, she's also joined by Michael Voitel here, who's Aon's, he's the Vice President for Aon's Executive Benefits team. So thank you, Mike, for being on. Robin, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Tony. And thanks, Angie, for really setting the stage for this conversation. Because to answer that question, where are we heading? We need to head back to the root cause of the problem in order for us to move forward. And the root cause, quite candidly, is employees are struggling. So when asked in what areas their employees were struggling most, these are the top responses that employers shared. And these are all the reasons why we are experiencing the Great Resignation, why we're having a difficult time filling those open positions, why we're having a hard time keeping employees engaged within our organizations. And it's because life is hard. People really are struggling, and it's not just about putting in a program, it's really about changing the experience. The only way we can make work for everyone is by creating an experience that provides resilience, agility, and belonging. So I'm going to spend the next few minutes talking a little bit about some of the ways that you as employers can help to address these issues within your own organizations. And I'll leave you hopefully feeling positive and empowered that it's not just about spending money, but there are some very organic things that you can do in order to drive change. So first, going to the root cause of why people are experiencing stress, because stress is the biggest issue right now in our society, with 71% of workers feeling stressed during their workday. And I'm sure it comes as no surprise to you that inflation is the #1 driver of stress right now. And it's the biggest issue that the American Psychological Association has seen since they began this survey back in 2007. So it's the basic costs of fuel, of food, of mortgages, everything that we're experiencing right now. The costs have gone up if we can even get them, right? So these are the areas where we really need to take a step back and say, are the programs that we have in place to address employee stress actually getting to the root causes? So when your employees are experiencing stress, this is where the rubber really hits the road. If we're thinking about driving better business results, these are the issues that we need to avoid, right? So when your employees are struggling with stress, likely they're not getting a good night's sleep. Maybe they're self-medicating because life as we know it is not worth living. That's when addiction occurs, right? People may be experiencing more physical pain. All of these lead to really challenging business experiences, whether it's people making mistakes, whether it's people getting injured. Ultimately, it's reducing productivity and it's driving adverse outcomes across all outcomes for businesses. So those are some of the ways that you may see stress, but when asked how stress is negatively affecting them, employees have very strong opinions, and you can see that stress is negatively affecting their work to a greater extent in 2 key areas. The first is motivation, and the second is focus. So focus is a particular concern as it relates to workplace safety. And as you're going to hear later today, it can have a huge impact on patient outcomes and patient experience as well, especially in a healthcare environment. But when we look at the combination of motivation and focus together, the biggest opportunity for improvement is reducing the likelihood of burnout. And you've already heard a little bit from Angie this morning about burnout, but lack of motivation and focus are key drivers of burnout, which is an occupational phenomenon. It's chronic workplace stress that is not managed effectively. And this is what employees experience when there's turnover, when extra work falls on the laps of the people who are left behind, and when they don't have the support from the organization to manage their workloads as well as work-life balance. With 71% of workers experiencing burnout, this means they don't have the energy to do their jobs. They feel distant or negative or cynical, and ultimately it reduces their professional efficacy. Now, you heard already from Angie a little bit about this concept of quiet quitting, where people are doing the bare minimum. I would also argue that you are at risk of people who are not only doing the bare minimum, but actually going out and taking a second job. So especially for workers who are in a remote environment, there's a new trend where people are actually doing 2 full-time jobs, doing the bare minimum for both of them and getting 2 paychecks. So that's a concern that is just starting to evolve right now. Another concept that you may or may not have heard about is loud quitting. And it relates back to the low engagement levels that we heard about from Angie earlier. In Gallup's recent research, they found that for every 1.8 employees who are engaged, there's 1 person who's actively disengaged. Now, Angie mentioned who's leading your ship, right? The person who is actively disengaged is the person who's trying to capsize your ship, right? If you've got 1.8 people rowing, you've got 1 person who's actively trying to flip your ship over. And this is a tremendous risk for organizations and a real value proposition for focusing on burnout and reducing the incidence of it. Now, we also have to take into consideration that working parents are more likely to experience burnout risk as a result of the change in their work-life responsibilities during the pandemic. Not only is this impacting the 4 million people who are leaving the workforce every month, but it is more likely to impact women, and it's more likely to impact women of color. So it starts to pull in the conversation around belonging and diversity, equity, and inclusion. How can we create a more inclusive and equitable experience for people through this concept of personalization? We're in the age of personalization right now. There's no peanut butter approach that's going to solve this. So we really need to meet people where they are, taking into consideration they're bringing home with them to work every day, regardless of where they work. And we need to help them get where they need to go and overcome challenges. Now, organizations have demonstrated their commitment already by offering a variety of different programs. You can see here in the gray, these are programs that organizations offered in 2022 to address mental health and emotional well-being. And the ones in red are those they're considering for 2023. So a significant increase in the programs that organizations are offering to address mental health and emotional well-being. But I would challenge you that the programs that you see listed here may not be solving the problems that your employees are actually facing. So when we think about questions like, do your workers have the flexibility in their schedule to get the mental health they need? Do they have more access to mental health resources than they have in the past? Do you and your organization have an open, inclusive environment that encourages people talking about mental health? Because this is an area where there's a lot of stigma. And if you don't have a psychologically safe workplace, your employees may not feel comfortable or confident raising their hands. And do your employees believe that their mental health is improved thanks to all of those programs and resources you saw on the previous page? When we asked employers how they felt in response to these questions, you can see the vast majority of them believe that they are having an impact. The challenge is that employees disagree, right? So we need to create that environment of trust where employees are willing to say, hey, I really appreciate all the things you're doing for me, and I'm willing to give more than the bare minimum, but I need more than what you're offering right now. So where I recommend you start in the spirit of leaving you feeling positive and empowered that you can do something different, you need to create a virtuous cycle of trust with your employees. Ask them where they want your help. Ask them where they are struggling, recognizing that there's a broad array of issues your employees may need help with. Some of these might require you to change your benefits or hire different vendors, but some of them are simply cultural, environmental, or policy-related initiatives. I'll also draw your attention to the 2 points at the very bottom, because while reducing debt and taking care of children's or other dependents' needs didn't show up at the top across the entire survey, you find for employees who have debt, reducing their debt is their top priority. And for employees who have dependents, those caregiving responsibilities are their top priority. So we can't just look at the data on the surface. We really need to do a deep dive. And one way you can do that is by really segregating the well-being priorities that you're finding within your organization across different generations, right? You will see some commonalities. This is a generation breakout of the data from the previous slide. So you can see on the bottom, the color coding. So when you look at the top priorities, some of them are similar, but if we are not personalizing the experience, meeting your employees where they are, helping to address their most basic safety and security needs and helping them get to where they want to go, we're missing the opportunity. And the reason why your role is so important in this equation is because what we're hearing from your employees is living a truly healthy life requires more money, more attention, and more time than they're willing and able to spend. So you need to make resources easily accessible, affordable for your employees so they can find the time, space, and resources to exert more control over their well-being. That's what will enable them to make better choices, which is what this is all about. And you can also show your employees you care by creating a culture where well-being is a priority, because only 34% of employees that were surveyed suggested that they believe their company cares about their well-being. I know every company cares about their well-being of their employees. You need to be communicating this. You need to create that culture of trust where there's a virtuous cycle where employees really know that you respect them and that you're able to help support them in all of those personalized ways. So I want to leave you with some ideas of things that you can do as an organization, kind of building off of where Angie started us today. Over half of employees feel it'd be easier for them to be open and honest about a mental health issue if their employer is supportive, right? And 87% of them think that they would, that the action from their employer would help them manage their mental health, reduce stress, reduce anxiety, reduce some of those other issues we've talked about today. Flexibility is at the beginning of the conversation, but it's not just offering flexible scheduling, but it's really encouraging people to take time off and really disconnecting, whether it's at the end of the workday or when they're going on vacation. It's taking time and just using resources to take care of their health. We know this is the employee's responsibility and nobody's going to do it for them. But if they don't get support from the organization to make it a priority, sometimes it really falls by the wayside. And one way people can take care of their health is by taking breaks. So it's through role modeling and really demonstrating the behaviors that you want your employees to, activate. Because when people feel supported by their organization, they're 5.5 times more likely to trust the company and its leaders. And this is really what we're going for as it relates to driving higher levels of engagement and reducing voluntary turnover. So I'm going to leave you with just a few ideas for things that you can do as an organization. So it starts with really understanding the root causes of distress in your workplace. Do some employee listening. And when you do that, make sure that you're collecting the information and helping employees to understand why you're doing it. Thank them for being honest and sharing their responses. Tell them what you learned. Tell them what you're going to do it, and then tell them what you did. If you don't make it through that entire process and that entire virtuous cycle, your employees will feel like you haven't really met your obligation using that data, and it doesn't build trust. The second is really evaluating cost and access barriers. Having the most amazing benefit program in the world doesn't do any good if your employees don't have reliable transportation, if they don't have adequate access to care, if they don't have the time and the resources and the space to take advantage of them. So make sure you're addressing those barriers. Enhance the services. So do an inventory of everything that's available now so you can identify the gaps. Enable balance, and that can be through flexibility, but it can also be just by meeting employees where they are and recognizing that everyone's personal needs are very unique. So allow people to address those work-life balance issues. Leadership is at the top, right? Engage your executive leadership. They drive culture change through their actions, through their communications, and really by role modeling expectations. And finally, equip those leaders, whether it's supervisors, middle managers, so that you don't have any gaps all the way down that waterfall. The key messages from your senior leaders need to be able to trickle down all the way to your employee population. And the way we can do that is through training and by providing tools and skills that will help our employees to make better choices. And that's really what this conversation is all about today. So I'd like to hand it back to you, Tony.
Thank you, Robin. All right, our final speaker, kind of batting cleanup here, is Linda McHugh, who's an Executive Vice President and a Chief Experience and People Officer at Hackensack Meridian Health. It's unbelievable, but she basically manages 31,000 team members. And prior to her joining Hackensack Meridian Health, Linda spent 35 years at the Cleveland Clinic. And we were talking about this the other day when we had our speaker call. But again, Linda, to you and your teammates, you guys deserve all the credit, because I know from day one on COVID, you never were able to leave. Actually, you probably had to double efforts, triple efforts. And again, we have a lot of hospital members, and I've heard it across the board. So Linda, thank you for being here, and the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the invite. Certainly the 2020 and 2021 were traumatic years for healthcare workers, to say the least. But we feel like 2022 is a recovery. We're in recovery mode. If you have the opportunity, I'm just going to give a little plug. We created a series out on YouTube called Unmasked. And there's 10 episodes, and it's our team members, our frontline team members, talking about what they went through and their feelings over the past 2.5 years. And it's pretty powerful. And I think it gives you some perspective about the people who have been fighting this COVID on the front line and the impact it had on them. But so everything we talked about today is totally relevant for us as well. We experienced huge turnover in our healthcare workers in every single job from in 2020 and 2021. You can see in the red line, 2022, we're slowing down on turnover, thank goodness. Anything under 1% per month for us would be somewhere around our back to our traditional benchmarks. So we're happy about that. In addition, we're seeing, let's see how I get to the next slide. We're seeing industry-wide challenges in staffing. Currently, I have over 4,000 open positions. Most of them are in the hospital. 27% of them are RNs and PCTs, which are patient care technicians. These require licensure and certification. We've hired over 6,000 people since January 1st. So a continual churn. I have at any given point 400 to 500 people in onboarding and orientation, depending on the role that they're going into. They can't just start work. They oftentimes, particularly in the operating room or the ED or ICUs, require almost a year worth of orientation. And we're down to 750 or so agency workers on site right now. In the height of COVID, we were up over 2,000, and we were paying a significant amount of money for those workers. When I track hiring relative to RNs, where we have our biggest staffing issue outside of our environmental services and food services workers, we are making progress. Again, the red line, the higher, the better. And we did do this by increasing our compensation. We have put tens of millions of dollars into compensation for our frontline caregivers. We raised our minimum rate in the north and the south because we span the state of New Jersey. There's two different regions really relative to market compensation. And so we raised our minimum rate to $17.50 for our frontline workers in EVS, food service, patient transport. And then we raised our nursing whole scales. I think we're right now paying the highest in the state. But the math doesn't work long term. We can't continue to spend the amount of money that we're spending. So we really have been working on pipeline development with our school relationships within the state of New Jersey. We've created apprenticeships and externship programs for patient care technicians, RNs, surgical processing techs. We've created a nursing scholarship program for people who have bachelor's degrees in non-nursing areas and want to do an accelerated nursing program. It's an 18-month program. We're paying for it 100%. We started a virtual nursing pilot to take workload off of the bedside nurse. A nurse, this is staffed out of Nebraska, and it actually is going really well. And we're recruiting international nurses. We have our first cohort here, started in July. And then we offer referral bonuses. So any of our current team members that refer a fellow team member to be hired in one of our hot job categories can get a referral bonus up to $25,000 for an experienced RN in certain areas. Our future focus, we continue to talk about our team member value proposition. So all of the things that we offer for our team members, we have the strongest benefit package of any healthcare provider. I'd put it up against in the country, and certainly more than any other industry. If you in our health plan, very low premiums, use one of our providers, everything is covered at 100%. There's no copay or deductible. We've improved our application experience, tried to make it quicker, do a quick apply. We're applying analytics to the applications as they come in. We have over 1 million applications on file right now. We're back to live recruiting events. That was really hard to do virtual recruiting. We're making on-the-spot job offers. I've mentioned the school outreach, and we did. The state of New Jersey has some apprenticeship grants that we're working with workforce development from the state. We have a debt-free degree program through our education assistance for current team members. When we think about well-being, we're thinking about it in a holistic way. So we have financial, physical, mental, a host of services that we provide for our team members, including what we call our Circle of Compassion that provides financial grants for team members that may have life issues that get in the way, and we support them outside of their role. One of the things we're really focusing on to improve retention is our leaders as coaches. And, we try to continue to focus on connecting our team members to our mission. Healthcare is a very purpose-driven organization. So the people that go into healthcare go into it for a reason, and they find joy in certain things. So we really have been trying to focus on what brings you joy at work. When you talk about burnout, any of the studies out of Stanford Mayo Clinic will tell you, if people have hope and can find joy in the day, it does help mitigate burnout and improve resilience outside of all of the other things that Robin talked about. Connecting to purpose and finding things that they love to do every day is really important. So when we talk about leaders as coaches, we've created a committed coach model, because healthcare is a team sport. It's not one nurse, it's not one doctor, it's the whole team together, including pharmacists, the people that bring the food, the people that clean the room. We're all there to take care of that patient. And so we really are working on upskilling our leaders as coaches and helping them be the motivator for that team member. And we have a whole education session for our leaders to help them understand what we call standard work that works. So involving team members in decision, daily safety huddles, celebrate wins or celebrate good catches. So we consider ourselves a highly reliable organization. We encourage people to speak up if they see something that may cause potential harm before it happens. And then we are transitioning to a tool that is called Stand Out by ADP, which is a strength-based assessment function that has frequent check-ins with the leaders to talk with their team members about what happened during the week. It's a really simple tool. What did you love about what you did last week? What did you loathe about what happened last week? And what can we do to make next week better? And then the practice of gratitude and the practice of talking about what went really well, and then what didn't, and what do we want to leave here as we go home to our families? Because, you know, when you're in this high stress environment, sometimes you have to just shut it off and move on to go home to your families. And so our leaders as coaches is also key to our engagement. So when you look at anything around engagement, it's very well studied by all of these different organizations that leader attention is key to keeping employees, and in our case, our team members, engaged. And so this is why we're moving to this new system versus a once a year or twice a year listening tool, which is what most engagement surveys are. This is a much more often check-in process. And there's 8 questions that get asked, and it's about the me and how I feel about my work. And so a lot of healthcare is emotion, right? So it's really about the human connections you make with both your teammates as well as your patients and their family and your leader. And then the we, which is the team. And so we feel like this is the right direction to go to continue to move the needle on commitment to mission, purpose, and engagement, and hopefully retention. And then just to transition, about 4,000 of our team members are not frontline employees, they're back office support. And when we did have to send everyone home when everything shut down, it was a quick flip of how can we do things in a hybrid fashion, including onboarding all of these people who were working in the hospitals. And so we believe that we're going to remain in a hybrid work environment. The flexibility that people enjoyed in these 2 years, particularly our financial people, our HR, my HR team. I have recruiters across the country now. It's expanded our talent pool, but we really had to work at providing some support for our leaders to understand how to lead and manage in a hybrid work environment. And so we've done a lot of work on what the return to office in a hybrid work model looks like, and created some guides for both our leaders and our team members that have some really simple things and then some more complicated concepts on how we want to work together going forward in a hybrid work model. And we created what we call Team Hackensack Meridian University, where we've created a library of content on managing and building virtual teams, transition resources for leaders to hybrid work. And we are soon going to have a landing page just for all of this on our internal intranet. And then we created 1-page reference guides for our leaders, particularly virtual meeting etiquette. Now that we're going into meetings, so I have this background behind me, we created virtual backgrounds that there's like 6 different backgrounds that team members can choose so that we're not looking at their bedroom or their kitchen as we are in virtual meetings together. I think that was my last slide, but I would end with, I think that, you know, while we all have experienced burnout, no matter what industry that we're in. I think the key is finding what brings you joy at work and amplifying that and amplifying people's strengths of what they like to do.
Thank you, Linda. All right, we're gonna go back to our general screen. All right, actually, now's the time if you want to unmute yourself and ask a question or put it in a chat box. I mean, Linda, I have one for you, I guess, and we kind of hinted on this during our speaker call, but in these challenging times, right, retention is a big issue. I can imagine for the healthcare side, and I've heard this down in Trenton too. What strategies are you seeing to retain, doctors and executives from the healthcare perspective? Are you seeing any kind of strategy?
Well, we've done retention agreements for to stabilize some of our areas that we saw high turnover in. That has helped. And also increasing our compensation structure that I mentioned has helped. All of the resources that we're providing leaders and the opportunities to grow and thrive through education and promotion opportunities and growth, leadership development programs. We started an official succession planning process where we've identified our top 200 high potentials and have created talent scorecards for them and are working with them on individual development plans. So really having that individual connection to understand what people's aspirations are and then helping them get to that next level.
Thank you, Linda. Any questions, comments for our panel? Oh, I see Sam. I don't know if you want to unmute yourself or. You have a question, Sam?
Yeah, we had the good fortune of working with corporate America and me personally with some of the largest healthcare systems in the country, and have many friends that are in the medical field, neurosurgeons, plastic surgeons, neurologists, et cetera, radiologists. So, the anomaly of COVID caused a very severe impact on the healthcare systems. But there was a shortage of nurses and physicians before COVID. So when COVID hit, it just doubled that stress level and that work requirement. So when you look at this, I mean, COVID is hopefully over. There was always a shortage of physicians. There still is physicians, psychiatrists, and it's about a 14% shortage of nurses. One of the main issues, I think, is not only to retain, but to recruit. And to make, the environment in healthcare attractive to the younger people today is critical. And it's probably reaching out to the community, educating to recruit folks. You talk about the younger generation, the millenniums, or whatever you want to call them. And the corporate side, there really wasn't that much stress. They were not having to get on the train to Manhattan and spend 3 and 4 hours a day commuting, and having the flexibility of working at home was a real plus. A lot of folks don't want to go back in. And a lot of the younger folks that I personally know, of my friends, because I have sons in their 30s, are working 2 jobs. And the job A or company A doesn't even realize they're working with another company, and they're pulling in 2 salaries. I was amazed to find out how many young people were doing this. So going back to the healthcare systems, what's really the primary strategy to recruit? Because there's always been a shortage. It's just been exacerbated by COVID. And then obviously the retention issue has got to be there.
Yeah, we've been working with the colleges on expanding. I will say this, though. I am not a believer that someone should go to a private school for $60,000 a year for a nursing degree. There are a lot more cost-effective ways to get nursing degrees. And we try to help all of our people who want to become nurses. So I have a whole cohort of people who started entry level that we're helping support through online nursing programs to become RNs. I think we need to think outside of the box of the traditional 4-year universities and engage people who might otherwise not have the opportunity to go to college. I think that's one of the things we've been working with the state workforce development program on, non-traditional students and supporting them through the process. Because coming out of a college with major debt to become an RN just adds onto the cost for the nation, but also for that person's stress, and it's completely unnecessary. Our university structures need to change.
No question. In Granada, they have the university, the medical school. I met 2 physicians. Their tuition that they owe is $400,000. So that's a huge number. You go to medical school, they went to Grenada to that medical school, and the cost is so astronomical. How do you make up $400,000, even if you're making $200,000 a year, that you have to pay off?
Hey, Tony, maybe I could jump in and share an innovative idea that Aon has operationalized, which would be relevant really in any industry. We offer an apprenticeship program now where we recruit people who otherwise wouldn't be able to afford to go to a 4-year college. We bring them in at a fair salary and they work 28 hours. I think it's 28 hours a week, and then they have 12 hours a week of classes. We pay for their education. They get an associate's degree, and at the end of their program, they get a full-time position at whatever is the appropriate salary for someone who would be starting at Aon with a 4-year degree. And we have operationalized this over the last 7 years in a variety of major metropolitan areas. So I think while it doesn't necessarily solve the issue with doctors, it definitely creates an opportunity to address diversity, equity, and inclusion, but also to help to address some of those gaps and increase the applicant pool. So that may be something that folks would like to learn more about.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you.
I think the other thing that we have to work on is our model of care. You don't always need to see a doctor, nurse practitioners, PAs, and our biggest shortage of doctors is in primary care. It's not in the specialties. Dermatology may be an exemption, but we have enough surgeons. We need more primary care to keep people healthy. We need to focus on healthy living and keep people away from surgeons.
Thank you, Linda. Is Mike, I think Mike Voitel is still on from Aon, but Mike, do you want to share some of the things you're doing at Aon from a benefits perspective for healthcare?
Yeah, thanks, Tony. So from a healthcare standpoint, not much different than what Linda's doing. I mean, we're working very closely with healthcare organizations on identifying, top physicians, identifying the fields that we really are, we need to keep staffed, to keep the organization running well. From, an executive standpoint, we're working with our nonprofit healthcare organizations to solidify their leadership, because one of the hardest things that we have going on is, the change in leadership at the top and getting, people interested in being part of a nonprofit. We need to keep people motivated to continue to give back to the community, but we're also facing the challenges of the for-profit world. The compensation's higher, they have equity, all that. So balancing that and, getting people in there to continue the vision and to solidify that over the long haul is important. So we're doing that. And then lastly, we're doing a ton of work with organizations on addressing what Linda had talked about with the nurses, in terms of finding ways to provide balance between compensation and retention and recruitment and all that. So, Aon has got a very strong healthcare presence, a very strong healthcare relationship across the nation with hospitals, and we're focused on physicians, nurses, and executives.
Thank you, Mike. There is a question in the chat box from Stephen. Let me get to it. from a commercial real estate perspective, I've experienced tenants requiring substantial increases in amenities from landlords using these to entice employees to come back to the office. Is anybody else experiencing that? Anybody want to opine on offices? I mean, I could. Peter, you speaking to us, Peter, or
Yeah, he's on mute.
you're on mute, Peter? Unless he's talking to.
I think he may be talking to someone else.
Okay.
I'll mention, we're seeing a significant change in amenities, both through the culture and the work environment that organizations are providing. Because whether it is having access to free food or subsidized food or concierge services, additional amenities, work-life balance challenges are getting in the way. And so organizations are doing whatever they can in order to enable people to be more productive. The most recent data that just came out suggests that productivity now is at a historical low that hasn't been seen since 1947. So in order to help people to be more productive, we simply have to make life easier, and we're seeing that in all aspects of our lives.
Yeah, thank you, Robin. I could tell you in the office building that we have here in Rochelle Park, a company called Bergman, they're a member of ours. They started a program called Bergman Cares, where about once a month they do things for the tenants, whether it's provide ice cream or food trucks or, typical ways to stay healthy, and they do yoga and things like that. So it's interesting that, I think there's still a push to bring people back to the office, but that's basically what I'm seeing here. So it's now 10 o'clock. I want to respect everybody's time. I want to thank our speakers, Angie, Robin, Linda. Round of virtual applause for them. And again, this was recorded, and our plan is to send this out to our membership tomorrow, Julia. We can make this part of our business beat, but I want to thank everybody for taking time. I know the hour goes by quickly. We can probably keep talking about this, but I hope to see you at our next event. And if I don't see everybody, have a happy Thanksgiving and holiday season, and we'll see you at the next event. Thank you, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Take care,
Thank you.
Tony.